Cait, welcome to the Growing Pains podcast. I'm so excited to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Well, this is like an encore conversation. We had an epic chat on your podcast, and we just kind of got really into the thick of it. We were talking about vagina shots and buttholes and birth and how you kind of stress out that that's going to be a challenge for you, but in the moment, it just kind of dissolves away. So motherhood, I think we can all agree, just fundamentally changes you.
It sends to the moon every last little fuck that might be lingering around. Like, honestly, it just does.
Honestly, I love it too, because I think sometimes we could get into our own heads a little bit too much. And it feels like this really clean and clear forcing function to just allow us to get out of our own way or address some things that maybe we've kind of been bottling up inside for a little bit too long.
Okay, I don't know what got us off on this track, but I just have to run with this because this came up in another interview. Allie, you're going to die. So I don't even know like how this ties in, but my growing up, I remember I had this one specific girlfriend, and I used to play basketball, competitive basketball. I was a competitive athlete, and so I used to travel a lot on the weekends for sports. And I swear to you, the mom of my best friend, she was like zero fucks given. And we would go to a bathroom, and we're high school girls, and we're like so embarrassed by absolutely anything, like not shaving our legs when no one can see it on the basketball court. So we'd be going away and traveling for tournaments and like go to the like a restroom at any like a restaurant or a rest stop, and her mom would just let it rip. And I would be mortified, like in the stall, just like this, like no one can see me. No one can see her. She doesn't care. And now I'm like, oh, I get it. Like when you're a mom, you just like don't have the bandwidth to be bothered by the small stuff. So I just think motherhood gives us the audacity. It gives us the like perspective of like what matters and what really doesn't, and just not to be bothered. Like, cool, yep, you saw my hoo-ha. I was birthing a baby, and the message was about birthing a baby. You can take it or leave it, but like, not my problem.
We get into our own brains. We think people are going to care. We think people are looking at us, watching us, but really all they care about is what's going on in their own
Oh, totally.
life, right? In their own situation. And so worrying and getting deep into like our own life and the things that do matter, right? Our impact, our legacy, all those things. But before we go there, let's like zoom out for a second and give listeners like the real on Cait and understand who you are and the business that you run. So tell me a little bit about Millionaire Mother and your kiddos and your family that you have at home.
Okay, 100%. Well, thank you so much for having me on, Allie. So I am Cait Scudder. I am the CEO and founder of the Millionaire Mother. I have 3 kiddos. I have an almost 5-year-old, which is cray cray. She'll be 5 in October, 5-year-old, 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old. All my kids are about 19 months apart. And I started my business back in 2017, well before motherhood, and got pregnant in 2020. It was really interesting because I scaled my business quite quickly. I scaled it to 6 figures in under a year, multiple 6 in about a year and a half. And at the time, I was living in Bali. My like biggest life worry, this sounds so ridiculous to say, but it's true, so I'm going to say it, was like, oh, what like raw vegan high vibe cafe am I going to work out of today? And it's just like the moms listening are like, shut up. And I listen to that now and I'm like, shut up, but also a little jealous, you know. And I think, by the way, side note, we don't talk about that part enough. Like, we wouldn't trade our existing moment for anything. Like, we love our kids so much, but like to have like a maiden weekend again, how good would that be?
Oh my gosh, to just be able to binge a show like completely guilt-free.
To binge a show, to read a book uninterrupted, to like go to the bathroom for an entire day without an audience. Like, sounds pretty nice. So anyway, that was me running my business. And then in 2019, I moved with my husband back to the States. We had been living in Bali for a while. I say back to the States, back for me. He's Australian, so it was a move for him. And we decided to move to Los Angeles. I'm from the East Coast, the New England area, and he's from Australia. And so LA was going to be like our middle ground, the compromise. Moved out there just before the new year, got pregnant on New Year's. So the whole of Q1 of 2020 / my first trimester, I was kind of in fetal position on the couch, didn't really have time to build a big community. And then just as I was like coming into the glow of second trimester, COVID hit. It was March 2020. The world was shut down. Allie, like the parks were closed, the beaches were closed.
Yeah.
It was brutal. We were by ourselves walking the streets of Beverly Hills, kicking a freaking tennis ball to each other. And we were like, this is not it. And so we had a real face off moment. Like, do we bring our kid into the world with literally knowing no one, just
Mhm.
by ourselves? Or do we do a real life boomerang and pack up our stuff and road trip back to New England to Maine where my parents are, and we decided to do that. And I'm very, very glad that we did, even though it was a real like blow to this fresh start. It was the right
Yeah.
thing to do. And so I had my daughter in 2020, and I after I had Ella, I definitely, started to feel not only my whole identity turn inside out and just rewiring, but could feel my business starting to change, the way I was thinking about things starting to change. But if I'm to be honest, like I still felt in so many ways like, yes, I was coming to terms with this new identity. I like chopped off all my hair. I was in this total up level portal. But in so many ways, it was almost like, I don't know how to explain this now. And I can say this having 3 kids now. It was almost like they say, like, having one is an accessory, 2 or more is a lifestyle. And I really get why
Mm.
they say that, because it was just like, yes, I'm a mom now, but I just, figure out a little bit of childcare here and there and bring her to everything, and it's cool. But when I found out I was pregnant with my second on Ella's first birthday, literally her first birthday. I took the pregnancy test and I was like, oh boy, here we go. That is when I was like, okay, we're in for a bigger awakening here. And so my business, I've been a business coach. My podcast was called Born to Rise. As I shared before in this episode, I'm a former athlete. And so I have this real, like, definitely integrated feminine, but a very strong inner masculine. And it was very oriented to like, if you can like take the risk. My TED Talk, I'd done my TED Talk in
Yeah.
2019, Rising is a Risk, do it anyway. It's like, yo, take the risk, do the thing, go after it. Very much like healthy ambition. But everything for me changed after giving birth to my second child, my son, Jack, because, and I can talk about that whole birth experience. It was wild, but that for me really planted the seed of an upgrade to my body of work and my career. And it wasn't like, oh, I wanted to throw everything away, although I definitely had those moments. And I think that any
We all
working
do.
mom who doesn't is lying. Let's just say that. And I really considered that, but I was like, no, but something needs to be upgraded, because
Mm.
me, mom of 2 under 2, having gone through what just went down with that birth, I'm not the same person anymore. And
Yeah.
interestingly, just to give you the timeline, it was about uh, I guess it was about a year, 10 months, a year later that the Millionaire Mother brand was born. So just thinking about that gestational window, it
Mm.
took that much time for me to be like, oh, I'm ready to evolve this.
What kinds of transformations happen in that gestational period with your business? Because I think there's a couple of things I want to kind of highlight here. The neural and psychological period of postpartum is heavy. I mean, heavily good, heavily challenging, heavily negative in some people's stories. I mean, you feel like you get the swirl of it all, right? And I think a lot of, I'll just call it traditional, a lot of traditional advice coming out of maternity leave, and we all know my stance on this, but it's don't make any big decisions. Don't move. Don't plan big business pivots. Don't plan big career shifts or whatever that looks like for you. And I actually believe wholeheartedly that this time of transition is an embraceable time to be able to actually lean in and make some of these decisions. So I want to kind of double click on that gestational period after Jack, before you started making these shifts. Like, what was happening with either your business or just like what was going on inside of your brain, and how was that rewiring taking place?
Yeah, 100%. So I can speak to that very clearly. So I kind of coasted post Jack. I'd set up my business.
Mm.
I had a mastermind model. My mastermind was called the Rise Mastermind. It was a 7+ figure offer, multi 7-figure offer. I'd made multiple millions from that specific offer. I really, really doubled down on that and I loved it. And I built in a window, like had some support coaches. I built in a window to be able to take some time and space. I think I shared with you on our interview on my show that I think I did, or maybe we talked about this offline. I can't remember, but I tend to struggle with mastitis postpartum. Knock on wood, I'm open to a different experience for the next one, but yes, manifesting. I don't want to speak it into reality, but 3 out of 3, I've really struggled. So thankfully, I had some spaciousness to be able to just be in delivery while, very light delivery while resting and bonding with the baby and adjusting to breastfeeding and all of that. But it's interesting. So he was born at the end of June. And then traditionally, my launch every year for the mastermind was in September, October. Well, it was like late August. And I was like, oh, shoot. Like, I'm not even thinking about. And that was sort of like my first, because it's not like I don't know how to plan an annual calendar. It's not like I don't know how to, but I was like, I don't want to say dissociating, but I was like, the fire wasn't there. Like, I enjoyed showing up to deliver for my existing clients, but I wasn't like orienting to the next big launch of Rise. And that was sort of like my first little cue of like, this is interesting. Like, this is a pretty big one. And I had a team. I'm like, what are we doing here? This is interesting. And so I'm like, okay, well, this is our bread and butter. So we're just going to double down. We'll push the launch back a little bit. We'll get back in gear. We have all our SOPs. Let's just go. And the launch was nowhere near as big as it normally was. And I'm like, okay, well, this is interesting. Do I really want to be holding a big group? Do I really want to be talking about like just, energy, strategy, and sales? Or is there something else? And so I'm like, okay. And I think, the honest answer is when I think that oftentimes when we've outgrown something or there is a refinement that's wanting to be had, and maybe this is like, I'm a 3-5 profile in human design. So I just have to like iterate and trial and error. So maybe this is just true for me. Maybe this will be true for others as well, or will resonate with other people listening. But I launched the mastermind, started running it, was feeling good in it, but something like wasn't clicking for me internally. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, this is interesting. I'm going to pay attention to this. And we started in the new year. And then I think it was in March, I ran a 6-week program called Boss Mama. And it was all about like balancing motherhood and business. And I was so lit up. I mean, like, I just couldn't wait to create that content, deliver that program. And then it was over and I just felt really like slumpy again. And I'm like, this is interesting. This is, again, it's another data point. And what I realized and what I finally, there was like a whole story about this. I don't know. I shared this story on Kate Northrup's podcast, Plenty, but I met actually the spiritual mentor that I booked a session with. His name's Aaron Rose through Kate. And because I had just been feeling like this didn't feel like a strategy problem. I have amazing, I was in a mastermind. I have amazing mentors, but I'm like, this feels like more soul level. And I booked this session with Aaron and I started talking about like what it felt like I was outgrowing. And he just gave me this really beautiful reflection. He's like, it sounds like Rise has like reached its life. Why don't you compost it and give it back to the earth? And I just felt my whole body exhale. And so that's what I did. And what happened and this was probably not strategic, but again, my way, I had to do it this way. I issued a bunch of refunds. I ended the program like 7 months early and I just kind of stepped into the unknown. But going back to the birth, having the birth experience that I did gave me the embodied courage to make a decision like that. Because if I was just looking at our profit and loss, if I was just looking strategically, I would have been like, this is freaking insane. Don't do this. Yeah. But I mean, you look at the size of a baby's head and the normal circumference of a vagina and you're like, this is insane. Don't do this. But it was just like a logical thing it wasn't a logical thing. It was an illogical thing, but it was a deep-seated knowing that something new was gestating and wanting to move through me. And I kid you not. So I closed down the mastermind literally later the next day, hopped on a plane, went to Paris for 5 days with my best friend. It was the best. We saw Beyonce. It was so good. And then we came, Beyonce is not a key part of this story, but it would be great if she were. Maybe she was subconsciously. But I came back and I was just like in the unknown, in the soup. And I had this big like scroll of brown paper in my office, and I laid it down on the floor and I like saw it. I got it. The whole vision for the Millionaire Mother brand, the membership, the upgraded mastermind, the programming, the framework that looked like a tree of life. It was all about like balancing our root system and our home systems and our inner world, our identity with the outer. And I literally channeled the whole thing. It was like a divine download, which is not, I mean, I know that sounds so hippy dippy, but it truly was how the whole vision for the Millionaire Mother came about. And it was like 6 weeks later that we launched and rebranded to Millionaire Mother and relaunched the brand.
It reminds me of that theory of primed evolution. Like things behind the scenes happen for a super long time, and then overnight it seems like people have walk on two legs.
No, but literally, and it's so interesting. Like I don't know if I'm mixing metaphor, like it's like if you want to write a long letter, write it in a short amount of time. If you want to write a short letter, you need a longer amount of time. It's almost like the forethought in the gestational window ahead of time. When you put in that work or give it that time to ripen, it becomes so much faster on the other side.
Yeah, I fully believe that. And I think too, like being in the postpartum period, I mean, what was happening in terms of like the next step play? Because I can imagine that showing up to something that you didn't feel totally lit up about, doing this 6 week cohort and feeling that energy again, feeling that aliveness again, and wanting that back. Was that a key factor in like the future of your work or just your body of work? Were you like, I just need to feel this connected to what I do?
It was about feeling connected, but here's what, if I can synthesize it down to a sentence, it was realizing and recognizing that motherhood was not some asterisk, some 6 week parenthetical side note to be talked about in the world of business. And it was the center. It was the bullseye center of the conversation, because my lived experience as a mother and an entrepreneur of multiple kids, I could not extract motherhood from conversations about energy or strategy. Right. And I found I was exceedingly kind of bored with, if I'm to be really honest, bored with and a little annoyed at conversations about just like, oh, just be in the energy. I'm like, yeah, bitch, tell me that after you haven't slept and your nipples are like a chewed rag doll. Like, don't even talk to me about it. And it was like, we entrepreneurs need mentorship. It wasn't that I stopped believing in mentorship, but it was like, I need mentorship that sees me and meets me where I'm at, that understands what the trenches are actually like. It isn't just doling out tropes and like mindset or even like somatic high vibes that doesn't take into account what in the washing machine turnaround just happened to my whole body, soul, spirit, house, life now that I have kids. And so for me, it was realizing motherhood is not a side combo. It's the center.
Yeah. And it like fuels that dissonance in our brains of like, if I can't do this over here, then how could I possibly do this over here? Right. I mean, you fail all the time in motherhood and you fail all the time in business ownership. And I remember early postpartum with my first son feeling like a failure and that I couldn't work at a high level because I was failing as a mother or because something would happen in the business or the business needed more of me, that I was failing as a parent because I couldn't be with my kiddo. And so I think having that mentorship to show up and see you like almost at your worst and best in a lot of circumstances, right? I think to reflect that to moms is extremely powerful.
So powerful and so important.
My gosh. Well, okay. So I want to talk about moms who don't have like motherhood centered brands? Because I think this is an important conversation
Mhm.
because some moms come to me and they're like, Allie, it's really easy for you to speak about motherhood as part of your brand and its power and its excitement and feel like you can show up truly and authentically as full you, mom, business owner, wife, all the things. And your brand is very centered around business and motherhood, which I love. I love that that's where we're centered. I love that we support with maternity leave. And I imagine that folks have walked through the halls of your mastermind and your memberships and your experience, basically saying, hey, it's challenging for me to be able to show up like this in a world of all of my male accounting clients. Like, do you know what I'm
Mhm.
saying?
Mhm.
So, talk to me a little bit about that because I think just because we don't feel like we can talk about our vagina on sales calls, which is a blessing. Like, I love being able to be that raw and vulnerable. But just because we can't do that does not mean that we can't still embrace motherhood as this incredible, powerful part of us that does help us be better in business.
So here's what I would say to that, to any, because I absolutely have clients who work in industries where, or their particular business or brand is not motherhood focused. I have many, many clients like that. And what I would say is their clients, the people they are working with, they either have mothers for clients or like they're they're married to the mother of that family. Like their mothers are everywhere. Mothers birth the world. They're in every nook and
Mhm.
cranny. There's over like, so even if, you don't have to be talking about your vagina on a sales call, but if for the moms who are afraid to bring motherhood into the conversation, I actually think that this is where some of the advocacy, and I don't talk about this a lot, but I think that bringing normalizing motherhood as opposed to just like sweeping it under the rug and expecting us to shove ourselves back in the pencil skirt with a smile on our face like we weren't just pumping or nursing however long ago, making this dropping the kids off at school and juggling all of these things. I actually think that letting our humanity and the motherhood that forms part of that humanity show as it's appropriate in a
Yeah.
business setting is important work for us to do as moms. And so I think that, for me, one of the events that I ran after giving birth, it was an event called Bigger. And the branding for it was this photo shoot that I did where I was getting ready for the photo shoot. And the night before, I was doing the like skinny jean shimmy, trying to get back into my jeans. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. And my belly was sort of like pulled and it wouldn't quite fit. I had to lie down and then I finally got it there. But I'm like, oh no, the shoot is not me in like some perfect, like flattering blouse that like hides that. The shoot is me literally. And it was called Bigger. And it was all about like, what have we outgrown? And rather than trying to
Yeah.
hide this, actually putting it at the forefront. And so if you're an accountant, if you're a CPA or you're a bookkeeper, like you're not going to do an event like that. You're not going to do that.
Mhm.
However, if you need to reschedule something, or if you are in a season of lessened capacity, or if you
Mhm.
have an out of office message on because your kiddo is sick, like why not name that? I guarantee it's going to lead to closer connections and more empathy from your customer and client base. It's
Mhm.
going to lead to probably, which we all know, when there is that deepened rapport, the lifetime value of the customer goes up. Like I think we think that we have to hide our motherhood because that's what growing up in like a male dominated patriarchal work environment makes us believe. But the reality is even those men are married to women who are, not always, but what I'm saying is mothers are everywhere. You can't hide us. We're there and we're in the background. And so I would challenge somebody who's saying, "Oh, well, easy for you, Allie, easy for you, Cait." Yes, in a way it is. And also, what does that bring up in you when you hear that, when you say, "I'm not allowed to show it?" And I would say, is that really true or is it unprecedented and uncomfortable? And what might be an appropriate way for you to bring your full self to work now? And what does that look like for you?
Mm. Honestly, I love that you said that for so many reasons. I want to double click on something you said just a second ago, but I do want to note that when we support women with maternity leave, one of the biggest questions that they ask me is how do I tell my clients? And often that comes from a lot of what you've just described. They've never been able to share with their clients that they were late because they were in the pickup line, or that they can't, meet some kind of deadline, or they can't allow some kind of boundary to be crossed for whatever reason. And it's always been something else besides being a mom, or maybe they're becoming a mom for the first time and they've never really had to like breach that, conversation or approach that with a client. And I think having that question at the forefront of this experience of what have we outgrown is a really, really important question, because I do believe that you don't come back from maternity leave. I believe that when you have your child, you can create a strategic time away, but you are fundamentally different. The you that went away to go have your baby and spend time and bond does not come back. It's a new version. And the question of what have you outgrown is really one that, like, anybody listening, I want to encourage you to just think about, because Cait, like, this question is massive. And I think it doesn't just come when your baby comes. How often do you ask yourself that question in your business? Like, is there a way that post kiddos, like post having Jack and going through that transformation, have you kind of built that into how you assess your business and where you want your time and energy and flow to be in the future?
100%. And for me, it's not so much like I do a quarterly check-in or a monthly top of month check-in
Right.
on the first. Like I'm not that rigid with it. It's more of like, how do I want to say this? Like okay, I know you're going to get what I'm saying here, but it's almost like I remember the first time leaving the house with Ella, I literally in my notes app had the most detailed checklist of everything I had to have in my diaper bag. I had like 3 spare onesies, the changing pad, packet of wipes, 6 to 8 diapers, like the diaper cream, the teething ring, I mean, she was like, I don't even know how, like 3 weeks old. Like it was just over the top. And then
Mhm.
as you grow and evolve in motherhood, or my experience anyway, now I'm like, wipes, nappy, onesie, it's 2T, it'll fit Jack or Ella. It's cool. We'll just bring it. It'll fit James. It'll fit the whole range. It's a nice middle ground, like, and we're good. And so in that same vein of just like learning intuitively and relying less on like the prompt per se, I feel like my internal radar is sharper now to
Yeah.
feel and to be honest with myself about, and I think that's not just because I've had more kids and I've been an entrepreneur for almost 10 years, but because I've also lived through seasons of knowing when something is ready to be let go, actually letting it go, actually pivoting. And so I feel like I have like a sharper nose now for when something isn't feeling aligned, when something has to be paused or shifted or let go. And I've done that. Like we launched our village membership back 2 years ago, ran it for over a year. It was great. And I knew something had to change with it. And I didn't have the capacity because that time. So when we rebranded to the Millionaire Mother, let's see, I was 2 months or 3 months pregnant with James, my third. And it was actually in my maternity leave, like postpartum. I was, and I wasn't following your rules, oops, of no big changes during maternity leave. But I was like, I need to just pump the brakes on this. We ran the membership through, I think, 1 or 2 months postpartum with James. And I'm like, I don't have the bandwidth and the energy, and it's not making sense for our numbers to like double down on this right now. So I'm just going to pause it, and that's okay. And so I feel like, again, that sensing, that attunement is just a lot stronger in me now, and the self-trust to back it up.
Oh, 100%. I believe that too. And I think like making those big decisions as you're going through personal transformation is the way to go. I think we can't expect to hold on to like past versions of our business the same way we can't expect to hold on to past versions of ourselves. Like when we become a mom, our business is us in a lot of ways. And I think generally speaking, a lot of folks are trying to just do the same thing, but with a baby on their hip. I know I did that with my first, and I remembered thinking like, I'll just bring him to all the Zoom meetings. And that completely flopped. And I didn't usher
It
in
works,
any
I
kind of
feel
change.
like, it works for a couple months, but then it doesn't at all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because I think we can all kind of grin and bear it through a season. And I think that's the discourse I'm really challenged by with maternity leave is like, it just has to be hard, right? Like fourth trimester, that first, 3 months, 4 months postpartum, it's just hard. And we just have to suck it up, buttercup, and do whatever it is we need to do. And I actually think there's more underneath the surface that's being primed, similar to the story you shared about your rebirth of your business. I think there's more going on that if we just sat with some stillness or we had some intention around paying attention to that, I think that aids in what you were just talking about, Cait, getting to know yourself and sharpening that intuition and knowing when, everybody says, your body knows before your brain. And I believe that, like I do. And I think motherhood, generally speaking, right? When you start to know that you're in labor, your body knows before your brain knows, right? Your body
Mhm.
starts to prime and does all these other things before your first contraction even hits. And I remember going for one of my checkups, 38 weeks or so, and they were like, "Oh, you're 3 centimeters." And I was like, so my body's been doing all these things, and I've just been like out here making pad thai and bouncing on a ball. Like, it's just happening. And so I think
Mhm.
generally speaking, leaning into that time of my body knows, my brain hasn't quite caught up yet. And I believe that that's what happened, in your gestation period for the millionaire mother after you had Jack. I think your body
Mhm.
knew, but your brain didn't know yet.
Yeah, totally.
Oh my gosh. I want to leave folks listening to with like a couple of tangible tactical things because I believe that it's going to be really helpful, especially for the mom listening who's probably planning her maternity leave. Maybe she's feeling a big pivot coming on. Maybe she's feeling like she wants to lean more into her identity as a mother and allow that to come into her business in a strategic way. What were some non negotiables for you when you started really building like motherhood and business like integrated into your life? Because let's just say this, we know that there's a very real demand for your time behind the scenes. I know your take on home systems. I love it. And I just want to know like what were some of your non-negotiables fourth trimester or just kind of like early in that season of welcoming a new baby that really kept business and your personal life kind of on the same page?
Absolutely. So for me, and this is a taboo one for a lot of women, and it's very charged, and a lot of women are afraid to talk about this because it sounds so quote unquote privileged.
Yeah.
But widening the base of support, having support. And to me, this is the most like I am so like flag in the sand about destigmatizing and speaking from the rooftops the importance of having support because I think the remnants of superwoman culture and this idea that we should just either bounce back or not need a lot or just be able to
Mm.
kind of carry it all is underneath this idea. So we shame women who talk about having support and tell them, "Oh, that's just like privilege or whatever." Meanwhile, being so jealous, feeling burnt out, and so support gets to look so many different ways. I will tell you, like, and this is just a small thing, but it's not a small thing. When I was pregnant with Ella, I knew about Meal Train, but I was way too embarrassed to either start one myself or have anyone in my family start one or my friends start one for me because I was like, we have
Mm.
enough money to pay for food. Like, I don't need to ask anybody. And I will tell you, oh my gosh, it brings tears to my eyes to think about it. I had a really rough delivery with Ella, and I remember getting home from the hospital and a couple days I could like anyway, it was a whole thing. I couldn't really walk across the room by myself. I had like a near 4th degree tear. It was really, really
Oof.
gnarly. And our neighbor, we were living in a rental at the time, and our elderly neighbors, it was like this old couple in their late 70s. I remember waking up from a nap and there was a hot pot of chicken noodle soup on the stove. And I remember standing there crying into the soup in my postpartum undies with like a cardigan and no shirt underneath and like my still swollen tummy and just like being so grateful for that nourishment. And
Mm.
I was like, oh, like this is when we talk and we look at traditional cultures, it's about like nourishing the mother. And so
Yes.
in Bali, like they don't even let the baby touch the ground for 40 days. There's always a family member or somebody from the village around to hold the baby and mother the mother at that
Mhm.
time. And so we don't have that infrastructure. And so it's interesting. Like I joke, like I wouldn't even have let anybody, I mean, it was such a receiving moment for me, that moment in the kitchen, eating that chicken noodle soup, but I wouldn't let my friends and family contribute in any way. And then third kiddo, I was like, I meet you in an elevator, like, here's my meal train link. Like, I was just like, why? I was so open to receiving, and I wasn't making it mean anything about being selfish, being guilty. Well, I could just do it by myself. I'm like, I know that a well-nourished me means a faster recovery time, means deeper connection with my baby, higher likelihood of positive outcomes with breastfeeding, better sleep, better relationship and transition with my other two children, better support for my marriage. Like, being a well-resourced, well-nourished mother was my biggest non-negotiable. So I just claimed that unapologetically. I let myself be held by my community. I doubled down on support in our home. And I also, this is another really important one, and it's like quite specific, but I really thought about what would fall by default onto my husband, and making sure that he wasn't the catch-all basin for house administration, etc. Because he stayed by my side for every second of that labor, and he was without the hormones coursing through his body. And he was the first in line with our big kids, which was his number one priority, aside from
Right.
tending to me. Like, he didn't need to also be in charge of all the other, meal planning and things like that. And so I can't remember who I heard this term from first, or who. So if you find it, put it in the show notes. It's not mine, but there's this concept of like, each person in the marriage needs at least two additional layers of support. And in that postpartum window, and the man or the partner, who gender doesn't really matter, but the partner can be one of the birthing mother's places of support, but the mother cannot be one
The
for
other
the
one.
not
Yeah.
exactly. And so, and then the mother might also have her doula, her mother, her friends around, her local community, what have you. But so anyway, I thought through those things, and it wasn't perfect. Like, we definitely had hard days. It is hard in so many ways and in different moments, but that kind of preparation and that being open to receiving support, I think about, I I really draw a lot of wisdom, solace, and I'm just like, let's study the OG teacher, which is Mother Nature. Like, how does this work in nature? When you are, is my homesteader showing right now, Allie? I'm like, when you're brewing kombucha, what do you need in order to brew a healthy batch of kombucha? You need to feed the mother. And when you feed the mother, you have a more vibrant, the little things that come off of that. It's like, we got to feed the mother, feed the mother, feed the mother. When you look at nature, it's like a well-resourced mother produces the best outcomes for all. So that was my biggest non-negotiable.
I absolutely love that. I think you said unapologetically ask for that support, and I think a lot of women do kind of, hold back from doing that, or they don't know how they're going to feel, and they like to think like optimally, right? Like, I may feel amazing, and I'm going to optimize for that. And I think going into it with that headspace, like, I'm going to feel amazing, is wonderful to do, and being able to prepare is also wonderful to do. I always say one of my best investments that I made in my second postpartum period was we had somebody come over and mow the lawn because my husband was mowing the lawn, and he wasn't able to like be actually with me like in the early days because we lived in Tennessee where like the grass grows super fast, and he was out there, it felt like every other day, which obviously wasn't true. That was my hormones talking. But nonetheless, I was like, wait a second, I need help in here. So it would take like half a day to go out and do all the things. And I was like, wow, okay, this is happening next time. So I love too that you brought up the partner, because that is a really underrated form of support I think that we can give to ourselves. Honestly, wow. I think There's so much too, I believe, but I love feed the mother. I think that is just such an important thing to remember, especially when we start to think about ourselves in this moment. We're always just told not to think about ourselves in a weird way, like just kind of stuff it all down or shoulder it. And
And that's somehow a badge of honor or something to be proud of. And I think that for so many reasons, just like looking at the outcomes is one, but also looking at the example and the precedent that it sets. I want my daughter to look at me modeling having needs and prioritizing those needs, and for the cultural conversation around that to not be like, "Oh, murmur, murmur, isn't she so selfish?" or "How entitled," or "What a diva," but like, "How healthy?" And for her to see, it truly is that, like, pouring from a cup overflowing. And when postpartum, they say, like, that placenta leaves a dinner plate size, like, wound inside of you. Postpartum is a window where, like, there has in traditional Chinese medicine, so much heat is expelled from the body because the living being that was living inside of your body is now outside of your body. And so really pouring back in during that time is so important because you are depleted from what was just inside of you. So it's the last thing on earth that it's selfish to have more support. It's vital. It's literally vital.
I love it. And honestly, what a great example for our kids, for your daughter to see you advocating for yourself, asking for this help. I hope that and I trust that it will give her permission when she grows her family to be able to advocate for herself and ask for the support that she needs. And I think that legacy piece is just so wildly important, and I know that that's at the forefront of the work that you do, and honestly, I just wanna honor that because it's just so critical.
Thank you so much. Well, that goes right into something else I was going to say when you were asking about non-negotiables. The other non-negotiable for me, and this isn't as specific just to the postpartum window, although it's certainly relevant then, but really more all-encompassing as it relates to motherhood and business, is that I will not sacrifice my family on the altar of my business. I will not
Mhm.
sacrifice like what matters most to hit a freaking number and be in some seven-figure millionaire club or something. Like, to me, my why and the legacy that I'm building is as much the nervous system relational template that I am building in my family as it is the money in my bank and the assets that I have and whatever. It's like I can't separate those out. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier is like, this isn't a side conversation. This is inherently merged. And so for me, that legacy work it is all those concentric layers and concentric circles. And for the women that I work with, that is at the forefront of their minds. They're not just out to make money. They do want to make money and they're unapologetic about their ambition and their expression and building a business that feels like home, but they're willing to have the grit and, like, harness all of that maternal energy, which absolutely means working through challenges. I mean, whether it's labor or getting through toddlerhood, like, it's freaking challenging sometimes. We know that. And there's the difference between, like, gritting through something that is sacrificing something vital and learning how to work through something hard. And
Yes.
the women that I work with, their ambition, their focus, they know they're building something that's meant to last, and they know that what they're building in their company is one piece of a greater legacy conversation.
Yeah, I can't help but think about some of these billionaire trusts and things that are left down, through families. And I think the statistic is that if you leave this massive trust, on average, it depreciates to almost nothing within 2 generations. So, the interesting thing I think about what you're bringing up here, Kate, which I wholeheartedly love and agree, is A, not sacrificing your family on the altar of your business. That is a daily decision. Let's just not say it's not. Like, this is a daily decision, and you have to create the boundaries and you have to create the systems to be able to live into that. But I think a lot of traditional legacy conversation is more on the financial side, and we know from data and from time that has passed that that is hollow.
Mhm.
Financial legacy, even leaving businesses down, leaving these massive trusts, it's hollow because it's missing the internal work that you're describing on being able to feel connected, be self-regulated, be able to know yourself, to advocate for yourself. Those types of skills, although they don't directly translate into a financial worth, it allows you to connect with that financial worth and appreciate that financial worth a little bit more readily, at least I think.
100%. And it's funny, like, I'm getting emotional at this part because I'm thinking about, the pieces that we would never in a traditional financial legacy, like family office conversation, think about when we think about legacy. But for me, like one of the greatest things that my mom gave me is lighting a candle in the kitchen and having music playing. And
Mhm.
my nervous system orients to that now. And I just thank God every day that she is my mom and that she set that example. And, I didn't get my like business ambition from her, but like that home piece and that feeling of creating a hearth and she was home for like the first, I think, 4 or 5 years. And then she worked to be able to pay bills. It very much was not like live your passion. And it's a whole other conversation of like, we really are the first generation that can do both.
Mhm.
And culturally that's available with digital like tools and accessibility and the internet. We truly are the first generation to be able to pursue a meaningful career that makes phenomenal money and be present with our kids. But that legacy is just as meaningful and impacts like this, all of these invisible yet highly visible at the same time parts of our lives, like having a home that feels peaceful, that feels harmonious, that feels regulated, to a degree. Like, please don't listen to this and think, oh, wow, Cait lives in fairyland. Like, my kids are fucking insane. So just there's that. But like,
Yes, I have
I
2 feral boys.
have their role that you like their feet at the end of the day, you don't even want to know about it. But my point is like part of the legacy that I received was that template for a harmonious home. And that is part of what I am creating. And I am not available to say, oh no, I'm too busy to do that. I'm too distracted. I'm on Slack. I'm on whatever, Voxer. I'm doing XYZ. I can't, I'm in a meeting to be able to create that. Like both of those are part of the legacy, what we're doing in the world and how we're cultivating our home.
Yeah. I love that so much. I love, honestly, so much of this. I can't wait to honestly be in a position where it really feels like I can see, like, if that makes sense. Like, I think I've gotten breadcrumbs from the boys already where I tell them, I'm like, "Hey, mommy helps mommy spend more time with their babies." Like, that's what I always tell them when they're like, "Oh, why do you have to work?" or whatever else, and they're still little. But I can't wait to just see kind of the imprinting because it's a lot of pressure. Like, I do also wanna say, when you said earlier, like, it's easier than ever to do both or we're the first generation that can do both, I believe that. And I also think there's more pressure than ever because we're the first generation that's able to do this, because we've got all the freaking research and all the books and all the gentle parenting and all the things. So I personally feel sometimes like leaning into our intuitive way that we want to do things, take that stuff into consideration, of course, look at the data. I'm a massive data nerd, but like at the end of the day, you do still need to be like, okay, how do I feel is the best way to do this, like from a business perspective and from a home perspective, right? You can swipe somebody's freaking webinar funnel strategy and put it out to your audience and it could completely bomb, right? Because it's not yours.
A
It's not
hundred
done the way
percent.
you would do it.
100%. I think that's so true. And I think that, of course, there's two sides to everything. So, yes, this is the age of so much opportunity. And this is the age of like a not normal amount of information that our brains are being asked to process. Like our brains were adapted over millions of years to like forage for berries and like hang out in the woods, not like receive so much information at all times.
Yeah.
So yeah, the pressure is there as well. And I think it's just, I think you said it really beautifully about taking what's for us and letting go of the rest. And, that can be as simple as like unfollow the accounts that are making you feel pressured and whatever, like limit your screen time and put your freaking phone down at the end of the day and spend a couple hours. Like this is just like a weird thing, but if this helps somebody, great. We have this like old, I don't even know what it is. It's some sort of dish, but it's like an antique. We got it at an antique shop and we put our phones in it. It's on our kitchen counter. We put our phones, it's a covered dish. We put our phones in that during meal times and sometimes even in the afternoon when we go outside and play with the kids. And just like having those pattern interrupts to
Mhm.
unplug from that onslaught of information. And as you say, just like orient back to internal being, that mode from which we're operating.
Yeah. I love that so much. Honestly, Kate, so many tactical things, so many ethereal too, like with so much wisdom to process and like think through. I imagine that I'll probably have some notes and some things in my journal tomorrow morning after I'm like downloading this episode. But tell moms how they can get in touch with you, learn more about what you're doing and building a millionaire mother. I so enjoyed everything that you gave in this conversation, and I just am excited to support, man, just like what you're building. It's so incredible.
Oh, thank you so much, Allie. Well, it's so great to be here. And absolutely. So you can check out my website, themillionairemother.com. I also have an upcoming free workshop called Legacy, where you can learn all about building a business and a life from the root of your motherly power that you feel so, so good about and that creates that multidimensional legacy. So that is free. And I'll give you a link for that, Allie, so folks can head on over to that link in the show notes of this episode. I'm at The Millionaire Mother on Instagram. And what else? I have a podcast called the Millionaire Mother Podcast, which you can absolutely check out. Check out my amazing conversation with Allie there. And we bring on other incredible guests. And I do some potent solo episodes each week as well. So you can check that out everywhere you get your podcasts.
Can vouch for the potency of the podcast. I've been a listener for a long time, and Kate, you bring the heat often, and I love it too. It's like such a warm place of holding, but also confrontation, which this mom firmly loves and believes in. So thank you so much for joining me today and everything that you shared on the pod. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Allie.